You're listening to Art Affairs, episode number 7. Today I'll be talking to Andrew Hosner. So my name's Michael Faith, and this is Art Affairs. If this is your first time listening, Art Affairs is meant to give you a look at and into the new contemporary art community, featuring conversations with artists, gallerists, curators, printmakers, shining a spotlight on the human side of the wonderful work they do. You can dig through previous episodes complete with show notes at artaffairs.podcast.com. And you can check out new episodes on all your favorite podcast platforms. Of course, if you like what I'm doing here, be sure to subscribe. And you can always connect with the show on Instagram and Facebook at Art Affairs Podcast. All right, so today's guest is co-founder of Thinkspace, Andrew Hosner. I first met Andrew for the first time 4 or 5 years ago when I was in town for a show at his gallery, and have been following his gallery ever since, and have since become friends with him. And one of the things that has always really impressed me about him is how he has always approached the community and the artists with a really strong sense of community and a collaborative spirit. He really stands out as an example of somebody who has uplifted the people around him and helped them to succeed and continue to be successful himself. And I really admire that about him. So I was really eager to have him on the show to talk about that. But then also his gallery, Thinkspace, is approaching its 15-year anniversary. In about a week and a half from when we recorded this, they have a 15-year anniversary show. So I was really eager to talk about that as well. So we talk about the origins of Thinkspace, how it has evolved over the years to adapt to the explosion of social media, general advice to artists, and a whole lot more. I also want to take a moment to mention that the audio quality on Andrew's side isn't the best. There was a bit of a setup issue, and I didn't really realize it until after the fact. I was able to clean it up considerably in editing, which is why this is coming out a bit later than I'd hoped. But it's still not quite where I'd like it to be quality-wise. With that said, I think the content is solid, and I didn't feel like it was really bad enough to take up any more of Andrew's time re-recording. I just mention it because I want you to know that I recognize it, and it's something that I'm constantly striving to improve. Like I mentioned from the very start, this is all incredibly new to me, and I'm constantly learning. So I appreciate your patience, and I hope you enjoy my conversation with Andrew. Andrew, welcome to the show, dude. It's really great to have you on.
Thanks, Michael.
With Thinkspace turning 15 this year, I'd like to start by revisiting a bit about how it all began. But even before Thinkspace, and even before you really got heavily involved in our community, you had like an entire career in the music industry, right?
Yeah, my wife and I were both heavily entrenched in the music industry for like well over a decade each when the idea of the art gallery even came up. If you would have asked 25-year-old me, are you going to have a gallery? I'd be like, huh? So it's definitely, we started a little later than a lot of folks do. But with that said, I think we went into it with a skill set and a knowledge of marketing and how things kind of influence one another and how important collaboration can be.
And you were doing marketing for them out in Philly, right?
Yeah. My wife was involved on more of the sales end of things, and I was involved on more of the marketing end of things. But with that said, she was heavily involved in marketing as well because she worked for a distributor that basically connected a lot of smaller labels and got them into the bigger stores and stuff like that. So they were a conduit.
So you met her while you were out in Philly, or was it after you moved to LA?
Met her through the job, yeah.
Okay.
Because she distributed our label that I worked for. So I would constantly see her when I came out to LA where she lived, or when I came to New York for sales conferences where she and all the other reps would come into. So
Okay.
and eventually it clicked one fine day when I took her over to High Times offices for a visit. Took some of the reps there that I knew were inclined to enjoy something like that, and it made a big impact.
Very cool. And even though you were in the music industry, like visual art was still a big component of your life, like for pretty much your entire life. Because from what I understand, even as a kid, you took art lessons from a family friend, right?
Yeah, my middle school art teacher, Bob Shane, rest in peace. He was super influential in just like getting me off my ass and just creating. And my mom and my grandma's old house, rest in peace, are still filled with like my early drawings, all framed up and stuff of Captain America and Paddington the Bear and everything else I used to emulate when I was a kid.
That's amazing. So, I mean, it seems like art's always been a passion of yours, even though you sort of took a detour through the music industry. It's always been a part of your life.
No, 100%. Not to mention just being heavily involved with like working with Wes Benscoter and some of the artists that did a lot of the album covers for the bands that we worked with back at Relapse back in the day. And then moving over to Century Media, a gentleman that used to work with me there that actually handled the art for a lot of our albums is now our art guy and does all of our ads and all of our design and every bit of our marketing credentials and stuff like that. And he's also an artist, acrylic painter that we show every other year now for a number of years and has been in our every group show pretty much since we started. So it's been kind of awesome to watch him spread his wings because he had always wanted to be an artist and went the graphic designer route. And then once we started doing the gallery and started talking about doing the gallery, I should say, I had asked him if he would help, kind of brand it and create all the design elements and stuff like that. And he kind of looked at me and was like, man, do you mind if I put a piece in the first show? He's like, I kind of miss painting, and I didn't even know that about him and had worked with him for, a number of years. And yeah, he's one of our, more popular, sought after artists.
That's very cool.
Anthony Clarkson. So,
oh yeah, awesome.
Amazing artist.
I didn't realize he did all of your branding stuff too. That's awesome.
Yep.
So what ended up getting you to move out to LA? You were in Philly for so long, and then you moved to LA.
Coming out here a couple weeks in summer 2001 after Sean and I had kind of clicked that summer in New York, like late July, August, and we kept in touch. We had long phone calls for about a month until where I finally said, fuck it, I'm coming out there for a visit. And came out for like the first week of September 2001 and was supposed to fly back to LA the morning of September 11th and woke up to take our car back to a message from the car place kind of going, I don't know if you need to bring your car back. Everything's kind of gone to shit. You should turn on your TV. And we turned on our TV and literally started watching it right before the second plane went into the building. And it was kind of a life-changing moment on a lot of fronts.
Sure, yeah.
For a lot of people, not to mention myself, because that basically, made me realize I wasn't flying back that day, stayed a little bit extra. I think a night or two after that, I ran into one of the guys at Century Media at a show that we went to, which was the competing metal label to Relapse, where I worked at the time. And they were like, hey, man, I've noticed you've been out here for a minute. What's going on? And I told them what was going on with my life. And they were like, wow, you don't want to work remotely. Come over and work for us. And went and had an interview with them the next day and decided pretty much on the spot to take it because it was a great offer, and flew home like, I don't know, 4 or 5 days later and packed everything up. And then Sean came out and we did a cross-country adventure back to my new home where I've been ever since.
So it was a flight delay that ultimately led to your, like, the rest of your life.
In a small part. I mean, yeah, I think it sped it up for sure.
That's amazing. And was she as big into art as you were at the time?
Yeah, probably even a little more so.
Really?
Yeah, she had a lot more ties and connects with the local artists and was already starting to collect a lot of prints and stuff like that. And I was more kind of the Mucha and Dolly guy all over my house back in Philly. But when she had come over to visit the house, she was kind of surprised that a metalhead had framed art all over the place, and it wasn't like crazy ghoulish stuff. So yeah, it was cool.
That's awesome. And then after you lived in LA for a while, you got really heavily into the art scene there, right? Like you guys were going to shows like every weekend from what I understand.
More than probably a couple times a week. But we were both looking for something that, we could do. And we were starting to go to flea markets and collect old radios. And then we just started kind of going to Mary Karnowski and Copro and some of the early torchbearers of the movement. And Black Market Gallery is the first place that we had bought our first original work together as a couple. Because she had had a few original, like, smaller works from, local artists and stuff like that. And I had a lot of prints, but this was our first kind of collaborative, like, oh, let's go down the rabbit hole of collecting. And we bought a little $300 Jeff Soto. Oddly enough, like I said, from Black Market back then, which is now the gallery house building that we occupy all these years later. So it's kind of quirky that we're in the same building that kind of, I guess, started the fire, so to speak. And then we were buying really heavily and going to Cannibal Flower, which is what led to Thinkspace, which was like a local monthly pop-up art rave. Back then there was Cannibal Flower and Create Fixate, which were two big outlets that provided artists that couldn't get into the gallery movement out here a chance to show. And they would be like 4 to 5 hour affairs with a small admission with all sorts of crazy performance art tied in, and then usually anywhere from 50 to 100 artists on the walls, and you just could go and check out like really cutting edge, amazing stuff that you just couldn't see at any of the galleries around town. And back then it was a much smaller gallery scene for this movement than it is now here in LA, or I should say than it was like maybe 5 years ago, because it's kind of done its natural progression, and now we're back to about 4 or 5 key galleries, whereas 5-6 years ago there was twice that. But a lot of them didn't weather the challenges that have faced a lot of us over the last decade. But no, it was a pretty magical time, very different time. We were going to so many art shows, and I was so anal retentive, and I was constantly taking notes and just having like a little notepad of shows to go to. And our graphics designer at Century Media, the label I worked at the time, was like, dude, let me make a simple little website for you to share all this knowledge that you collect with other collectors out there, because there's really no way to gather it all, because that was before, Juxtapose was still a GeoCities website. It was like updated like once every quarter. And High Fructose, Rest in Motion, yada yada, none of those existed yet. And Juxtapose was still a quarterly originally back then, and it just had like a little line listing in like 8 font or maybe 6 font at the end of the issue, where you could kind of, if galleries had their shit together and got their listings in early enough, you could see what was going on. So we started compiling all the listings that I was on from just various email lists, and just going out too often and collecting all the postcards when they actually still mattered, and compiling all of that into a weekly little email. And within a couple months, we were like 3, 4, 5,000. It grew really quickly. People signing up for it to get the details, to where it was getting to the point where we would be out at shows and people would come up to my wife and I and thank us for letting them know about that show. They're there because of us and things like that. And it was kind of wild. And we got pretty popular in the scene in 1988 and started like actually putting the little Sour Harvest logo icon that Brendan Monroe made for us on the back of their postcards as like kind of like Sour Harvest approved. And that went on for about a year. And then one faithful day in like the summer of 2005, we were all hanging out over off of Melrose. LC from Cannibal Flower had gotten a very small little storefront right off of Melrose. I'd say like maybe 200 square feet. I mean, it was tiny. And he was kind of trying to have a gallery outlet to help nurture folks like Luke Chu and Joe Ledbetter and Thomas Hahn and Joshua Pecker, Sylvie G, a lot of the artists that were making waves early on at Cannibal Flower, but there wasn't a space to kind of help them go to the next level. And, galleries that had just opened like 1988 and a few others were starting to, see the writing on the wall, and we're starting to, invite folks over to shows, and I don't think LC wanted that since he had did so much with Cannibal Flower at that point. So he opened the Art Annex, and it was open for like maybe a month. It hadn't really done a proper show yet. It was just showcasing inventory and stock from past Cannibal Flowers. And we popped by there one afternoon to see it. And a collector, or I shouldn't say, sorry, an artist friend of both of ours, Nathan Spohr, that had actually did Cannibal Flowers logo back in the day, was hanging out too. And we were all just hanging out, having a smoke and talking about art. And we were talking about how Sour Harvest is doing and what Cannibal Flower was going to do next. And the notion of teaming up kind of came up rather organically. It's just one of those things that was like a good yin and yang, because Elle already had a lot of the connects with local artists and a pretty good collector, foundation. And then we had a nice mailing list and, connections to a lot of the collectors that way, and a marketing know-how and a business know-how. That was what was kind of missing from Cannibal. And Nathan was like, what about Thinkspace? We were just throwing around names. And when that one came out, we were all like, that's pretty fucking cool. We definitely wanted a name that wasn't, I don't know, just typical, I guess. And we didn't want to have like Hosner Contemporary or Kroski Contemporary, because it's about the art. It shouldn't be about your ego and your posturing of your family's name or any such bullshit. No disrespect to galleries that choose to go that route. It's just we chose not to. And once we did that, we kind of started poking around how we were going to, kind of launch it. And within a month, word got out, and they've become really close friends over the years, but back then we didn't know who they were. But two girls that are a couple, Nicole Rosen and Suzette Frank, surprised us one day on MySpace, and were like, hey, we just bought your domain and this, that, and the other thing. And when we were looking at it, we were like super perplexed, because we're like, are these guys trying to, get one over on us, or are they going to try to sell it to us? It was super, super early on. And it was just one of those things that they're both super entrenched in the tech industry. That's what they do for a living. And they were like, look, man, we did this as a favor for you, because if not, somebody else would have done this.
Sure.
And we're like, oh shit, and again, this is very early days of the internet. So we were like, rad, and we met with them, and a couple days later, and they gave us everything, so it was all officially in our hands. And then they went and helped us. Once we designed our logo, they bought our first sign for us as like a little opening gift.
Oh, wow.
Just like really crazy stuff that just shows how amazing the art community is.
Were they just like involved in the Sour Harvest blog? Were they readers of the blog, and that's why they got so excited?
They were readers of the blog, and we had met them real briefly at a 1988 benefit show once before, and they had beat us out on a couple of things in the auction that night, so we got to talk with them. So I think they just felt we were kindred spirits and got on with us, and I think they were excited that a couple more people in the scene were going to be crazy enough to launch a gallery and help them see more art, so they wanted to be a part of it. And they're still a part of our family to this day, and Suzette still helps with our website, and Nicole's still a big supporter on a patron front.
That's amazing. It's a very kind of punk rock approach. Even back with Cannibal Flower, it seems a very punk rock approach to like doing a gallery event, and then you guys come along and sort of the communication aspect of it and marketing, and then you combine together. It's like punk rock the whole way through.
Oh, 100%. Especially coming from where we come from the metal side of the music spectrum and stuff. We realized early on that, collaboration's key. A metal band can't really go out and tour by itself. It's got to tour with 2 or 3 other acts from 2 or 3 other like-minded labels. So they all put in money, time, bandwidth, exposure, and pull from each artist's fan base. And then you've got an event. And early on, we knew that doing group shows was going to be important, because we saw how impactful that Create, Fix It, and Cannibal Flower were. Not to mention we were coming out of the ashes, I shouldn't say ashes, it's still going to this day, but coming out of, the Cannibal Flower school of things. And we just kind of amplified it and gave it a business backbone.
That's very cool. And so it was originally in Melrose, and then it moved to Silver Lake for a while?
Yeah, we were in Melrose for 5 or 6 months in the space that Elle had from a friend. And I think Like, yeah, because we there in November. We had to move in May because the beginning of May he came up to us, the guy that was basically letting us have the space. And naively enough, my wife and I never really asked the scenario of how he got the space. We probably should have. I think we just assumed it was rented or locked in, and we were just, I mean, it was never even a plan to do this for a year. It was just like, let's have some shows, let's have a few parties. And it just kind of kept snowballing and doing its thing. And one day this gentleman came in and was like, oh, hey, that's cool. You guys are, having some success here and the space is fun, but my wife wants to open a hair salon. I'm going to let her have this space. And we're like, oh, cool. When? And he's like, end of the month. And it was yeah, I think for a good amount of time, we all were just like, oh, it was fun when it lasted. And we were trying to wrap our heads around how to do it. And we knew we couldn't get into a space that quickly. And we had Lola Gill now, but back then just Lola, her first solo booked for the following month, and we knew it was going to be a big show because she had just had her first solo kind of focus at Cannibal Flower, and that went over really big. And my wife and I owned a couple pieces, and we knew many people that were excited about this coming out, so to speak, for her. And maybe 3 to 6 months earlier, we had been to a pop-up show out in Silver Lake at the space that turned out Logan Hicks, the world-renowned stencil artist, owns and operates. And it was just his studio, and he was really good friends with Leslie Repido, an artist that isn't really that active anymore. She's kind of more of a mom and doing her own little things on her Etsy. But back then, she was a pretty prominent artist, and she had curated a show there at Logan Space that we had went to. And we were just sitting there racking our brains. And Leslie's like, just go out there and talk to him. And I'm like, all right. So I drove out there on a whim, knocked on the door. Logan answered. He's like, hey, Andrew. And I pitched him on the notion of, hey, would you mind cleaning up the front of this gallery? There was like a boat in there and all sorts of crazy shit. It was just his storage. And then his studio was in the back where he cut stencils all day. And I was like, hey, man, you'd save us. Can we just do this for like 3 to 6 months until we find a space? And he's like, awesome. He's like, I can't say no. He's like, let's do this. And he came on board and let us do that. We were able to open our show. We didn't miss a beat.
Wow.
And for about 6 months, we coexisted with us in the front and his studio in the middle, kind of. And then in the back, we had like a little office that we both shared. And right around the time we were getting to the point where we knew we had to find new digs, he had decided he was going to move to New York, where he's been ever since. And he was like, hey, man, he's like, I've got a pretty killer lease here. Do you guys want to take it over? And we were like, shit, yeah. Gave us a little bit more space. When he moved out, that's when the project room was birthed. Okay. When we started doing 2 shows a month, because we were able to make his studio into a smaller second gallery space. And I think we hung out there for about another year. And right there at that Silver Lake Sunset Junction area, which really put us on the map. It was just a lawless kind of off the radar part of LA. We would start our shows on Fridays at like 7 and they'd be going to 1 or 2. It was just, they were parties. We were sponsored by Grolsch and Doers. So, I mean, we had like literally like cases and cases and cases of the flip top Grolsch, which is an expensive beer and a nice beer to begin with. And then Doers, which was a really nice scotch. And word got out and we would be listed on openbar.com every month, and just these like sites that existed back then that I think enabled people to, get wasted all weekend and not ever spend a dime if you took advantage of the flourishing art movement that was all over LA. It was a pretty comical site back then. Once we started growing up, we went out of our way to not get listed on there, to be honest, but
like, thanks, but no thanks.
Exactly. Once we kind of realized that, we should focus on selling art. But we were just working on getting the name out there, and we were still selling a lot of art, but it was still very much a mini Cannibal Flower. I mean, it was very much a gathering, and it was pretty incredible. And like the whole block would fill up with people. And
how did you end up in Culver City?
We were starting to... the artists we were working with were starting to get pretty popular. And we had just did Natalia Fabia's debut solo show, Hooker Mansion. And it was really well received. We sold a lot of the work, and the biggest piece in the show, oddly enough, sold to Bruce and Jan Helford, who, unbeknownst to us, were in the stages of getting ready to open a gallery over in Culver City. And I don't know, a month or two later, we were like, "Oh, this show went great, Natalia. You want to do another show?" And she was like, "Oh shit, I already agreed to do another show at this new gallery." And we're like, "What?" We kind of like started looking into it, and then realized they were starting to hit up a number of folks that we were working with, which was, our own fault. We should have been thinking more long term and should have been thinking bigger from the get go. And we kind of we're like, we need to investigate this Culver City thing a little bit more, and which, was right near our house as opposed to other side of the moon where we were in Silver Lake. It took us like an hour to get there on the weekends to open the gallery and stuff. So we just kind of started keeping an eye over there, and we noticed the black market spot that I mentioned earlier was on the market. And we went and had a look at it, and it was perfect. And we decided to make a few things, add a couple walls, change a couple of things in the flow so it was more ours and not just slipping on another person's pair of shoes. And hit the ground running. And again, we're lucky enough to never have had to miss a show that we had booked, never were closed for more than a couple days. And in our entire 15 years, we've been lucky like that. We're in our third spot right now here in Culver City, and each one has just always flowed right into the next. And we know that going into 2020, we'll probably be looking to move to our fourth spot just due to the way things go, and when a bunch of galleries come into a certain part of the city, we've raised up the rents and the square footage too much to where signing another extension of our lease is just going to get too expensive. And a lot of the other galleries in the town are already starting to vacate and move to other places in LA. So whenever I mention that to people, everyone's already like, "Where?" And it's like, well, it's a year from now. Let's see what happens. So we'll start looking in summer 2020 to see where the next home's going to be. And a lot of the artists that we work with that have maybe done 2 or 3 solos at the current spot, they're excited. I've mentioned it to them. I think everyone's it makes sense every, I think, 10 years at least for a gallery to move, unless you've got some big, super, super huge space.
Besides just being more affordable, what kind of goals do you have for the new space? Do you want it to be bigger? Do you have anything in mind?
We want it to be about the same size, maybe the front a little smaller. The front room is pretty big in terms of like what it demands of somebody for a solo. And definitely have a small project room still, but we want the back room to be like 3 times what it is now. I would love the back room to be bigger than our front gallery, to be honest. We're doing so many museum shows moving ahead and a lot of other things of that stature that storage is paramount for us. And we want to be able to have like a dedicated print area and dedicated ship area and stuff that we used to have, but as we've grown, it's just been overtaken by storage. And we get by now, but we know that having a bigger back end would, it's just going to make my team's life a lot easier.
Sure.
Which is, the most important thing to me, because they make us run and are who we are.
Very cool. Obviously, collaboration has been something you're really big on over the years. I think Thinkspace alone was sort of born out of a collaboration. It's really ingrained in the DNA. So one example of that over the years has been the Beyond Eden event. So I wanted to chat with a little bit about that. That started back in 2010, and I think in its original form lasted like 5 years, and then has been resurrected again this past couple months ago at DesignerCon. How did that all first begin? How did that get started?
When it started, the first one was called East of Eden. And it ultimately was the brainchild of, I can't think of his last name right now, but Mike, the gentleman that used to run Junk Gallery, JUNC, right at pretty much almost catty corner from us at the Silver Lake Junction area. And he was, a lot of people don't remember him, or it was too early in the movement, but where Giant Robot is and GR2 is now, he was very much, they were still around back then, but he followed their mold. He definitely got a lot of kids right when they came out of Art Center. He had a specific vision, and he was the first gallery to really like champion Brendan Monroe, and who we were like huge fans of back then. So we were constantly over at his space, like, you know, supporting him and vice versa. And we were all in a part of LA that was just a little funky. LA has little sections that if you're from one area, you won't go to that area, and vice versa, just because of geography and drive time and shit. And there was a lot of really cool cutting edge spaces like ourselves and Junk out in that area at the time. And we just knew if we banded together and, you know, screamed together, we'd make a louder noise and get noticed. And he was like, what if we did a small little, you know, an art fair without walls was his notion. And he and I talked quite a bit, along with Tulsa Kinney, who ran a little space out there. And we were able to get the ear of the director over at the Los Angeles Municipal Art Gallery, which was located on the grounds of the Barnsdall Art Park, which is a little forgotten gem of just a few acres of goodness up on a hill in Hollywood that's just filled with sculptures and just little arts theater and Frank Lloyd Wright's early house, and just like a lot of hidden art gems are up there that pretty much a community of 50 and olders knew about, but the younger art generation didn't. And we kind of pitched them that, hey, will be a twofer. You know, you'll help us, and we're also going to greatly help you by bringing a couple thousand people that are primarily under 50 up here. And we rolled into the idea of doing East of Eden. I think there was 6 or 7 of us early on. I honestly think that we're the only one of the batch that's still around, of the galleries that gathered together for that first East of Eden. I'd have to look, but I'm 90% sure on that. And we did it, and it cracked off really well. And then when it came time to do it the next year, a couple of the galleries had already faded away. Mike from Junk was starting to realize that this wasn't what he wanted to do. I think he wanted to be a teacher a little bit more, which I believe he still is a teacher to this day out at the Art Center. And we were kind of like, shit, we don't want to let this go. So I had a meeting with the folks there at La Mogue, the Municipal Gallery, and a couple other friends, including Lee Joseph, who was a big arts PR guy back in the day, and pitched them on the notion of what if we went a little bit of a different route, and, you know, came up with the idea of Beyond Eden, so it tied to East of Eden. But basically the notion of that title was that it was, you know, just showing this underbelly of the art movement that wasn't really getting a whole lot of attention at the time, and bringing us all together and, you know, kind of throwing a party. And it came out amazing. I think that first one we had 3,500 people show up over the course of the 2 days, and just knew that something was clicking then. And the people at the Barnsdall loved it. And each year that it grew, we kind of started incorporating the theater into it and having movies play there, Mr. Bitchin' and many other ones. And it just was a moment in time, so to speak, I think, as my partner LC puts it. It was just right time, right place, and it was just, you know, magic was created. And we somehow all magically got along. And I mean, looking back, those are pretty crazy events, because we had about 4 days in there to hang an entire, you know, 15,000 square foot space and then run with it. And then those led to a really good relationship with the director there, which down the line, a couple years after having done a couple of the Beyond Edens, I was connected with Robert Williams by Greg Escalante, rest his soul, the old mastermind behind Juxtapose and Copro Gallery. And he was basically like, we were just chatting, like, hey, you know, Bob's got a new body of work and nowhere to put it, and he's always wanted to have a show at La Mogue. He's like, and I know you have an in. And he's like, you should go out and have a meeting with him. And I was like, yeah, fucking A. Went out and met with him at his house. And where's Bob live, Sean? Carlsbad? Chatsworth. And like sat in his studio just ogling at these masterpieces all over the place that he's creating. And we had met a couple times prior, and he's just the most down-to-earth like guy you can imagine for a legend. And I don't think anyone can argue that statement about him. I would argue it with anybody. He's definitely a fucking legend. And we sat, and he explained to me how when he was a kid in the 60s, he went to Dolly's show there at Lamaug, and how he was at every day he was at the show, and he never missed a day. And for all 2 months it was up, he went every day, and it was the most, life-changing experience and influential thing that he's ever went through. And he told himself then that, before I die, I'm going to have a show at Lamaug. And it was just like, wow, let me see what I can do. So I went and had a meeting the next day with Scott, knowing that I had Robert's full blessing to make it happen. And Scott was totally into it. And I remember calling Robert the next day, and he's like, I've talked to Scott a bunch of times. He never called me back. I'm like, well, I don't know what to tell you, Bob, but I got my foot in the door. Let's fucking make this happen. And we went out there and we had a meeting, and that's pretty much the day that we locked in Slang Aesthetics. And from there, we hit up Gwynedd and Evan from Juxtapose, kind of going, hey, this is all coming together pretty beautifully, and your 20-year anniversary is next year. Can we do a 20 years of Juxtapose in tandem with Slang Aesthetics? And they loved the idea. And looking back, it was it's definitely a touchstone moment in our history, and a touchstone moment, I think, in LA history, and definitely a big part of Bob's, end of his career, so to speak. I mean, definitely the cherry on his career sundae, as he put it. And that show then went to travel on, I think we traveled it to 6 other museums. We were involved in 4 of the other 5. And now he just launched his new body of work this past October up in Seattle.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that was a pretty magical, huge thing for the movement, for Juxtapose, for Bob, for us. And then somehow miraculously, bewilderingly, right after that, a new director came on board. We were like, oh man, this next Beyond Eden's going to be a slam dunk after this. Went in early in the year to have a meeting with her, and she was like, oh, this all sounds good. Okay, it's probably going to cost you guys about $20,000. And we're like, huh? And evidently the old director was supposed to be renting us this space, and just never thought to, because he felt that they were getting that much and more out of it, which they were.
Sure.
And she kind of was looking at it now of, look at how big these have all been. We've obviously done a lot for you. And we're like, look. And then I kind of had to try to come to a reality with her that, look, but all your other events before that drew like nobody. And now a whole bunch of new people are coming up here, and it's trickling over into your, movie events that you do throughout the year. And it's just like, it was palpable. You could tell that it was making an impact on everything up there. And her having not been there for any of that growth or development, wasn't seeing it that way. And we had already had that 5th Beyond Eden all booked. It was ready to go. So we went ahead and did it. And that was the first one where we had to charge admission. I was basically able to go, hey, let us still do this, but the following week we'll have you that $20K. And we got our normal couple thousand people through the door, and we charged $10 a pop. So we were able to get that money together. And we then paid her just to, follow through. And the last day of the show, that Sunday, I decided to just do, there was probably a couple hundred people there, because Sundays were always good, because it was more of a family day, and people that didn't want to, deal with all the drinking and the partying aspect of, the openings of those on Fridays. And I was just like, hey, thanks everybody for coming. Wanted to let you know that sadly this is going to be the last day of the last Beyond Eden ever. It wasn't our plans, but due to powers that be not seeing the worth of it all, and us not really wanting to charge $10 admission to this, we're going to bow out and go out on top instead of going to someplace smaller and just doing it half-assed. And I think 20 minutes later, a girl came up and tapped me on the shoulder. And it was Shannon that used to run this gallery out in North Hollywood that we had did a small little pop-up with 4 or 5 years earlier. And she's like, Andrew, she's like, I'm working at this amazing library now called the Brand Library out in Glendale. You need to come check it out. And never heard of it. Much like Barnesdale, it's kind of a beautiful gem built in the 60s that just kind of feigned from, being on people's radar and was kind of catering to a 50 and older crowd, and went out there, and the space is epic. And that's where we now do our biannual Nexus event. It wasn't quite as big and didn't have quite as many rooms as Beyond Eden. She really wanted us to keep it to be Beyond Eden, but I didn't want it to be, like I was saying earlier, I didn't want it to be a shadow of what it once was. And it just didn't seem like it was going to be able to, like 3 or 4 galleries would fit, but not 6 or 7. And I was like, let's do this, but let's do it something else and make it all us. And it's got enough rooms to where we can do a couple big solos and then a couple group shows and then a big sweeping grounds and stuff. And we've been doing those now. Our third one's coming up in November of 2020 there. And the first 2 are really well received. A couple thousand people showed up to each. And it's just a beautiful space with one of the best collection of art books that I've ever seen. And oddly enough, a couple artists that we work with that live in Glendale came to that first show and they were like, dude, I've lived 10 miles or 10 minutes from here. One guy lived within a couple miles of it, and he's like, I never knew this was here. And it's just an epic place to just kind of discover art and get inspired. And there's like a koi pond and all sorts of stuff. It's pretty special. So then, fast forward a couple years to having a meeting with Ben Grotsky from DesignerCon earlier this year. And Heidi from Hijinks Arts, one of the big PR teams in town that really supports the arts movement here, hit me up and were like, hey, do you want to come on out and maybe talk about bringing an art gallery element to DesignerCon? It was something that Ben always wanted to do, but just didn't really know how to go about it properly, I guess, and knew that, we had a lot of connects and had, dabbled in it before. And one thing led to another, and now it's back. In November, we launched it, and we were kind of off in the corner, and it wasn't the best location, but it came about in August. So, I mean, he gave us the best spot and the best, best run, I guess you could, considering that we had a couple months to do it. And we were still able to get 6 other galleries and the Fullerton Museum Center on board. And it cracked off pretty well. So next year we'll be more in the middle. We'll have a much nicer spot, have more time to put it together, hopefully have a little closer to 10 galleries, and really kind of bridge the gap between the the gateway drug that is DesignerCon and the art world. Because that's where, you go to get a cheap little hand-painted, sculpture or, a one-off, hand-touched print or a print run. And I mean, it's very much the gateway drug for getting into fine arts. I mean, just like prints are and things of that nature. I think once you start buying 4 or 5 prints a month, you realize, oh, hell, if I didn't do this for 2 months and just saved this, I can maybe get a small original. And that's what happened to us back in the day. I mean, Mary Karnowski one day was like, hey, you guys are buying a lot of prints. If you do payments, you can maybe do a bigger piece. And my wife and I looked at each other and we're like, payments? She's like, yeah, I'll do payments for up to a year. You guys rule. And, we were super supportive of her and vice versa. And I think that's when we got our first piece that was 4 figures. I think we got a $1,200 Camille Rose Garcia that took us just about a year to pay off.
Wow.
But looking back, I mean, that was one of those instances that really kind of made us go, oh shit, we can collect even though we have a pretty small income. We've had friends that are a little bit older that are very versed in the art world call us the Herb and Dorothy of new contemporary, just because, I mean, neither one of us have ever made much over, 50, 60K a year or whatever, but we, have just bought frugal, just bought early, bought what we love. And that's still what we preach to collectors and patrons that we work with to this day. I mean, because people come over to the house and be like, oh my God, how'd you guys afford a Barry McGee or that David Cho? And we're like, well, when we bought that was $1,000, or when we bought that was $600. And people will be like, how'd you know? And it's like, I don't have a time machine. It's like, I just bought it because I liked it. And I'm like, luckily we have a pretty good eye. I guess it's shown over the years. And at the same time, you just got to trust your gut. and I mean, honestly, there's probably 100 pieces in our collection we probably got 700 pieces. We need to catalog it. We started 2 years ago and then we haven't continued.
So you don't have any kind of record of what all you have?
No, sadly we do not. No, I'll be honest, we do not. If anyone out there is listening and wants to help us, hit us up. But I mean, we've got the first 300 or 400 on an Excel grid, but that I think in 5 years we haven't been able to even think about updating it. But everything's all beautifully stored and beautifully packaged, and out in our garage, temperature controlled, and this, that, and other things. So, and now, I mean, for 3 or 4 years now, every time we buy a piece, it's Sophie's choice. Something's got to come down and go away. And every time I go out there to put something away, I always see something that I wouldn't mind coming back in and putting out. But then we're in the same situation. Oh shit, something's got to come down.
Do you feel that you guys being such avid collectors has made you better at running the gallery?
It's definitely a part of it, because I think we can relate to people a lot easier. And I love going to people's houses and putting up a piece. I'm not going to charge you like most galleries will in town. I'm actually going over to collector friends on, I think, Monday next week, just to hang out and put up like 20 pieces with him that have accumulated over the past year that he hasn't had time to put up. And he spends a lot of money with us. We've become friends. And honestly, I think it's going to be a fun day. We'll probably just twist up a couple and hang out and, put up art and smoke and have a good time talking about art. So I'm actually kind of looking forward to it. But yeah, it definitely does. And I think it helps us connect with the artists a little bit more. I still got a super creative, artistic side to me when it comes to our marketing, and a lot of the cool installations and things like that we've done over the years, and the projects that we've done at the museums with Powwow and others. A lot of the crazy installation ideas have been birthed from just sitting down with the artists, spitballing and throwing ideas out at them. And they're like, oh, I never thought about that. Or they'll throw out an idea that I then build on. So things of that nature are really exciting and special. And I think it always brings new ideas to our head of what we can do. And a lot of the duo shows that we've done over the years, like, it's been just artists that I thought their palette would work really nicely with each other, or that there was a thin red line that connected the two bodies of work. And more often than not, the two artists didn't really know each other. And now, looking back on most of those duo shows that we've done over the years, the artists are still like best buds.
Oh, wow.
It's just like we brought two kindred spirits together that have, created magic multiple times over since the show's ended. And it's just kind of neat to see that building a small bridge like that can lead to so much beauty being shared with the world later on.
For sure, yeah. Yeah, yet another example of sort of the spirit of collaboration that you always seem to have are these roadshow style exhibitions. You where you team up with galleries to put on a show in their space. It's the LAX / whatever other airport you go to. How important have these collaborative shows become in your yearly lineup?
We're pulling back on them greatly going into this year. I think we've only got one this year in June at ABV Gallery, Greg Mike's space. We went really hard the last 2 years. Going into 2020 and 2021, we're focusing a bit more on the institutional aspect of things with, we've got like 4 or 5 museum shows, a couple university shows, and a library show. So, but with the LAX series of collaborative shows, I knew early on that it was going to be super important, going back to what we were talking about with like bands touring and the metal side of the music world. And it's just helped get our name out there in a great way. It's helped a lot of the artists get another strong gallery behind them in a great way, because each time we do one of those, I'd say half dozen to a dozen artists that were in that show then get picked up by said gallery to do, shows throughout the year. Other group shows they do 2, 3, 4 person shows, sometimes the solos. And that's ultimately what we want to do, is just create as many opportunities as we can for the creatives that we work with to enable them to actually do it full time, to make a living off of what they do. Because if we're only offering them one show a year, it makes it a little bit more difficult to do that. And with it also said, we knew the movement just had to be exposed as much as possible. Social media has been magical for this movement over the last decade. And with that said, it's put the art in the hands of a lot of people on their, 2x2, 3x3 inch screens. But so many people that live outside of, let's say one of the main like 6 to 10 big cities in the world, they never get to see this work. Or if they do, there's maybe one gallery in their market, but it's only doing, a handful of shows each year with artists from the scene, and it's just usually a solo or something. So they've never really had that opportunity to see so many of one style, the new contemporary movement encapsulated into 100 artists in one spot. So when we do those really big traveling shows, I've had people ask, why didn't we, when we put them together, why weren't they more focused? And I told them that my notion was showing how vast and just varied the movement is. I mean, I've been quoted as saying that it's almost more who you show with and who you show alongside in the last 5 years that has made the new contemporary what it is over a particular style, like when it was more pop surrealism or lowbrow, which were both titles that were a little too confining for where, how vast the movement was becoming. And when High Fructose started kind of having new contemporary included in their masthead, it was already a term that was getting banded around out there for about a year. And we just knew it was, for lack of a better term, just perfect. It is kind of an oxymoron because it's just new. But I actually saw that term on the walls of the Chicago Museum of Contemporary Art, just earlier this year, being used in a slightly different context, kind of explaining how, the contemporary that they're featuring is the new contemporary because it's different than Warhol and Basquiat and stuff. So obviously the history books will, in the next 10 to 20 years, come up with a better term, or maybe we'll stick with new contemporary. We'll see. We shall see what the scholars go with. But
we need to get you out here to Austin.
I know we've been looking into it. We're totally down. I mean, and that's the thing. We've never really pursued these. We've always let them come about organically. We'll be hanging out with the gallery 2-3 years in a row at an art fair, and we're and they'll just be like, "Oh man, we love what you guys do," and it just kind of comes about. We don't really want to invite ourselves in anywhere. We're, I guess, like a vampire in that way or something. I don't know, but we want to be invited in. So, and because we've been hit up a lot of times over the years where it's obvious that it's just a gallery that no one's ever heard of, and they're just hoping that we can come and bring them a bunch of attention. But we always want it to be somebody that's already making a noise, so to speak, but in a market that's not, an A market or, more of a secondary, tertiary market. And, have it be mutually beneficial for the artists and us and that gallery to do it, so we all get something out of it. When we did our second one in Detroit with the guys at 1X Run and Interstate a few years back, I overheard one of my favorite quotes that I still reference quite a bit to this day. This girl was looking at her friend and she's like, "Fuck man, this is awesome. I love this show. It's like my Instagram feeds come to life in front of me." And I'm like, "Man, that's fucking rad." And I even tapped her on the shoulder. I'm like, "I overheard that. That's awesome. Thank you." My wife and I put this show together with her friend, and, that's the best fuel I could have, gotten out of this tonight, and told her I was going to, quote her many times over the years. And she was like, "Oh, thanks." But no, it was, honestly, that encapsulates what we were trying to do and what we aim to do with the LAX series. We want to put as many artists that people are already probably familiar with, but let them, see it in front of them in the 3D, real life, and be able to feel the brushstrokes and see the decisions made and why they did what they did here and there. And it's just amazing to see how many creatives from that market will come, not to mention just art lovers in general. But whenever we do those, the one we just did in Chicago with Vertical Gallery, probably 20 local artists came up to me throughout the night, "I cannot wait to go home and paint." And that's pretty fucking cool, man. I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It's inspiration's what fuels what we do. So to be able to create that for somebody is special. And at the same time, it's that feedback's what fuels us to keep doing them as well.
Yeah, it sounds like you're putting a bigger focus on the institutional shows, like you said, the museum shows. So is that sort of taken a lot of that space in your portfolio?
We've been pretty busy the last few years with it, but as we do them, each show opens up another door, so to speak. And each group show that we do with a director/curator at a museum, I think it opens up, it kind of pushes them a little bit more down the rabbit hole in new contemporary, because everyone knows the Shepherds and the Causes and, the big names. But then people are like, oh shit, there's a whole, universe of hundreds of other artists that are just as amazing, but just haven't been blessed with that, exposure that someone like a Shepherd or a Cause has been. And then I think they also then take a look at how those first group show or twos did that we curated for them, and they see like how many new bodies came in, how many new like people under 30 came in, and they listen to the feedback over the year following, and it's really starting to lead to us getting small solos for our artists at the institutions that we've done group shows with in the past, and that's ultimately what we want. We just did Kevin Peterson. We're working on Kevin Peterson's first big solo for next year. Cinta Vaudel will have her first big museum solo in 2021. Spencer Little's working on one. So it's just things of that nature that are just the main reason why we're continuing to push, try to push the doors open. And we know that the more successful shows that we have at the smaller museums, the more the bigger museums are going to have to start to pay attention. Because at Long Beach Museum of Art, where we've done the Vitality and Verve exhibitions, it's just 25 miles outside of LA, so everyone goes. The second one was so big, we had to turn away like a couple thousand people on opening night, which was good and bad. But the museum was baffled. I think like 5,000 people showed up, and due to fire restrictions and just time, we were only able to get about 3,000 of them through the show. But each successive Vitality and Verve exhibition that we did there broke the attendance records that we set with the first one. They'd been around for like 40, 50 years. The first one drew just over 22, I think. And they were like, this is the biggest show we've ever had. And then the next one drew 24, and then one after that drew 25. So it's just like, that's a lot of people to get into a small museum of about 10,000 square feet in a secondary market. And people pay attention to that.
Sure.
And we're doing a lot with the Fort Wayne Museum of Art out in Fort Wayne, Indiana. We've got a really special show coming up there in 2021 that I don't want to mention, so no one takes the idea. But it's pretty fucking rad. We're working on that right now. And then Hebrew Brantley's going to have a big show there that we're helping curate. Awesome. To bring more people in the Midwest to his art, since he's, right there from Chicago, just a couple hours away from Fort Wayne. And a couple other things are coming together for 22 and 23 with them in terms of solos for artists that we've had there. We had taken Bob Williams' Slang Aesthetics show there as well in the past. And then Andy Campione from the MOA up in Lancaster, just about 70 miles outside of LA. We're getting ready to do the third edition of Powwow Antelope Valley there this September.
Oh, nice.
And then we're taking over the museum, and there'll be solo shows with Mark Dean Vecca, Kayla Mahaffey, Kevin Peterson, and Kathy Ager, plus a big group show. So we're really excited about that. And the third edition of Nexus is coming up in the fall at the Brand Library, with a number of amazing solo shows and group shows in the mix. So, and then Spencer Little has his solo show at MOA Cedar in the summer. And Julio Acab Dianig will have a solo at MOA in 2021. Julio Acab, as most people know him on Instagram. But he'll be coming over and doing some installations out in the desert of his masterpieces that he recreates out there in 2D form when they still look like they're all beautifully framed up. So we're excited about that. There's just a lot of stuff cooking, and I know that the shows that I just mentioned will lead to a couple of other shows that I'm trying to kind of shoehorn in at other spaces that are, we've got their ear, but they're still wanting to see like what we do with the next couple shows.
So it's like a snowball effect, really, is what it is.
It's a total snowball effect, and we just want to continue with it because ultimately, that's what's going to cement this movement and cement the artists of this movement in the history books is institutional recognition and involvement. Nothing's going to do it more so in a quicker or stronger fashion than that. Just looking back historically at how the art world works and how movements like the pop movement and stuff came to, such importance and prominence was due to a few curators really making moves and taking, Andy over to Paris regularly and things of that nature. It's just, you have to do that to make a noise, especially in this day and age of the internet where it's a little too easy for people to just drop somebody a DM and, forego a person like myself. And I get that. And that's why we do so much, because I think, I say this all the time, and I mean, some people are like, you're shooting yourself in the foot. And it's like, no, I'm shooting you in the foot because you don't hustle like we do. You got to earn your 50% these days. It's too easy for somebody to just have a space and go, oh yeah, I'll do a show and then take your 50%. And it's like, if they're not doing ads in 2 or 3 magazines, if their social network's not stronger than yours, and if, they're not really got like a built-in collector base, then why the fuck give them 50%? I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm throwing stones at some people, and well, get off your ass and work harder.
Yeah, that's something I wanted to talk to you about, because I think you mentioned social media earlier, and then it's come up again. And clearly social media has changed the art scene in ways that we're only just beginning to fully appreciate. But how do you as a gallerist think that other galleries and yourself has to change in order to stay relevant in this age?
You just got to do a lot more, like I was saying, because people like, you never take a break and this, that, and the other thing. And it's like, well, it's just too easy for somebody to just go, sure, and reply to that DM and get all the 100%. But I think the artists that realize the worth and the weight of a strong gallery are the ones that are still, making the best of both worlds, so to speak. Because, I never make anyone sign like an exclusive to where like you can't sell anything to anybody. Because, it's going to happen, and we can't keep people busy 365 days a year, and people have to live and pay bills, and I get that. I do ask during that 3 to 4 month period, month or two before, month or two after, to funnel stuff to us, and that's just mutually beneficial for both parties if the show does well. But to this day, I've worked with artists that are still selling works out of the back end, out of their studio on DM or setting up a commission when I have a show on the walls. And I'm like, and whenever I find out about it, I'm just like, really? I'm like, come on, man. And it's only happened a few times, but it happens. But sometimes people don't really get the big picture. So we've taken it upon ourselves the last 3 to 5 years, especially when we bring on a new artist or somebody, that maybe's coming over to us or graduating up a notch or whatever, to kind of lay out like, hey, this is what I'm going to do. And this, that, and this are going to come to you probably within a couple months of starting to work with us, just because we have strong connections with this blog and strong connections with this magazine, and to not be naive in that it's just magically coming to you. It's like to know that working with us brings a lot of weight, brings a lot of benefits, brings a lot of return and reward. And we really fucking work hard to deserve, I feel, the percentage that we take. Because it is an odd little makeup that's not like any other business in the world. And we decided early on, even going back to our early days, we have always done pop-ups. Even when we weren't doing them in other cities, we were doing North Hollywood, we were doing Venice, we were doing Santa Monica, because LA's fucking huge. So, you can be making a big, big noise over on the west side and no one knows who the hell you are or gives a shit about you downtown. So that's why we, did LA Art Show early on and helped launch Littletopia with Greg back in the day and things. It just all goes back to collaboration. And I got interviewed about a year ago by Graffiti Art magazine out of Paris. And the European art world's still very much where I think the US was like maybe 10 years ago, to where it's still very cutthroat and no one collaborates and a lot of the galleries don't really seem to get along. And it's exciting now for me to like see, you see people like Antler and Paradigm doing like exchange shows now and stuff like that. And I'm not saying I gave them that idea, but there was definitely nobody else doing collaborative gallery shows when we started them 10 years ago. It was very much a bewildering thing for every press person that has ever talked to me about it. They're just like, but you're helping your competition. It's like,
a rising tide raises all ships, right? I mean, if everybody's successful, then you're successful.
I think so too. Yeah, I think so too. I mean, the bigger the movement gets, the bigger we can all become as galleries, as long as we take advantage of the, opportunities presented to us. Some people do, some people don't. I mean, the first collaborative show we ever did back in the day in Chicago, I mean, he closed a few years later. I mean, it wasn't because he didn't collaborate further or anything like that, but it's funny. I mean, I think 2 or 3 of the galleries that we collaborated with have closed, and as have many of the other galleries that, I looked up to or at one point bought from, or someone like Shooting Gallery in San Francisco that just seemed to make every wrong decision you could possibly make, and is now kind of probably the most martyrized person of the entire movement of what he did. Oh, that's the wrong term, sorry, but just the most reviled person. He's just, what he did is, seeing things like that kind of just show you how easy it is, I feel, to just do right by folks.
Right.
I mean, as long as you just pay people on time, treat them respectfully, and return works when you want to, and bust your ass to get their work out there, you're kicking ass as a gallery. And there's so many people that just can't seem to do that are a gallery, And I mean, there's a couple right now that I know are starting to ruffle feathers pretty badly, and pay slowly, and the word's out, so everyone's kind of starting to keep an eye, I guess, on their rosters, because they've got some good artists, and if they're going to go the way of the dodo, then let me help out some of the folks that I've always respected and collected that you work with, but you're not going to work with anymore. So
is having a diverse revenue streams important, or even necessary to be successful today with prints and books and all the different avenues that you have?
Oh, for sure. I mean, there's months where a good print release will, cover our basic costs. And we try to do that, as often as we can, because then that allows us to invest more and put more back into the bigger museum shows we're working with. Because a lot of the museum shows we're funding. We're getting maybe 2-3K, which covers some travel, because we're dealing with museums that are, smaller and aren't really, have those 10, 20, 30, $100,000 budgets set, you hear about for bigger museum shows. But that's why we're able to, we always work it out to where we can offer the works for sale on the back end. Obviously, they're not going to be for sale at the museum. And working with smaller, museums and secondary and tertiary markets, they're able to kind of allow us to do that. I don't think a LACMA is going to let a curator come in and sell works out the back end, because that kind of goes against the cardinal rule of not being able to have a monetary gain from set exposure at institutions. So we're kind of in that middle ground right now. And whenever we do that, whenever we do have a successful show, we always donate some back to the museum that let us do that, which, works out to be a nice tax deduction for us, gets the gallery a little bit more in cahoots with the museum. And it's just a nice symbiotic relationship at that point.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you've helped launch the careers of many artists over the years, the 15 years that you guys have been around. Are there any new or upcoming artists that you have your eye on right now?
Yeah, and I've learned over the years to not really mention them too often. So, but I mean, but there's a couple artists that are about to really crack wide open over the year ahead that we've got a lot of stuff positioned with, that we're excited to really be working with. I mean, 2 artists from Europe that we've put a lot of time and effort into over the last couple of years. I think 2020 and 2021 are going to be years that they're on everyone's radar, Super A and Dulk, especially. And then new artists that we're really excited about, Kayla Mahaffey and Max Sansing out of Chicago. Super excited with where both of them are taking their work, and we've got a lot lined up with both of them over the next couple of years. And there's a few others that are just starting to come on board, but until everything's kind of inked, I'm not going to mention their names here, unfortunately, just because a lot of people out there curate by red dots or let us discover people and whatnot. So, and we've picked up our artists from other galleries over the years, but I've never headhunted them, I guess you could say. I mean, I let them come to us if they're not happy or realizing that there can be more, so to speak. When I mentioned earlier how, when we were starting to have success with Natalia Falby and some people, another gallery came along and grabbed them. And I wouldn't even say that they necessarily headhunted them. At the time, it hurt. It cut like a razor. But after, 13, 14 years of having that happen, you get a little bit of a thicker skin, and you also realize that that's a good thing for said artists. And at the same time, that just opens the door for you to, welcome somebody else into your roster, into your family, and help make them that next big thing, and watch them growing with us. And the one thing that's been nice is over the last 5 to 7 years especially, is we've gotten to a spot now to where most people are comfortable growing with us. But now with the advent of, I guess, a lot of the artists from our movement starting to kind of get to that next level of success, which I guess doing museum shows like I do, I'm kind of fueling this, but I'm my own worst enemy in a way. But I mean, more and more blue chips are realizing that, I need a Mark Ryden, I need a Shepard Fairey, I need a Cause, to kind of be cool and look like they have some clue of what's going on with the greater art market, which they don't, but that lets them seem like they do. And so they kind of come along, and there's quite a lot of cannibalism going on. I think it's going to be a lot more of it going into 20 and 21 and 22, as more galleries like ourselves that are really starting to get our artists out there on an international stage via fairs and, institutional shows and stuff like that, that the brighter the light is that we shine on them, the more eyes are starting to go, interesting. So it's a double-edged sword in a lot of ways, but I think as long as you continue to hustle and, work as hard as we can, whatever, people will want to hang around.
What sort of advice would you have for new artists who are just getting started in their careers and want to get noticed?
I get asked that a lot, and it's a tough one nowadays. I often think if I was a teenager in this day and age and having to live with social network bullying and just all that shit, it's just such a different world. Even just from 10 years ago, even though the internet was around 10 years ago, it's vastly changed with how people are, how things are perceived, and there's just some more social networks than ever before. It's like, which ones do you focus on, especially with Instagram being kind of shit these days. But I think more than anything, I still think it goes back to getting your work seen. And I always tell artists, get together, form a small community, even if it's just going to your local drink and draw and meeting more people there. But there's strength in numbers always wins. And if you can get together with 10 other friends and rent a space, you each pop in $100 for the month, and you throw a big ass rad party, even if you don't sell anything that month, getting seen, getting exposure, making noise is the best thing you can do, I feel. And just being a part of your local scene. Don't hit up a gallery saying that you want to show with them when you've never gone there. It's like I'll have people come in and be like, "Oh man, I love your gallery, blah, blah, blah." It's like, I've never seen you. I'm really good with faces. I will remember a face, years later if I've seen it. And I'm just like, you've never been into my space. And now you're sitting here telling me how much you love us and this, that, and the other thing. It's like, and I'll have a conversation with them about that. Cause when time permits, and we haven't done them in about a year, but my partner LC is now doing them at his bar, the Art Bar, over on Venice. He's doing them once a week now, I think on Saturdays or Sundays. But we were, for the longest time, the only gallery in town that would do walk-in portfolio reviews on Fridays. We would do them. And there's a couple artists that we found through that we still work with to this day. It's time consuming, and maybe only 1 in 10 are ready for prime time, I guess, for lack of a better term. But with that said, LC, my partner, is really good at just finding that one little positive that kind of will help people, spark that creative juices. And he's got the gift of gab, I will say. And I know many a person that, probably would have maybe given up in other circumstances has been fueled when they've left us. And with that said, at least a half dozen artists that we still show to this day have come in and been exposed to us via just the walk-in. So and we still look at I still look at every submission. via DM or email or whatever. I mean, when people DM me going, how do I submit? It's like, have you even spent 2 minutes on our website? It's right there. And I always kind of walk them through that. I'm like, man, don't be such a millennial. Like, I can't do anything without asking somebody a question. It's just like, just Google. And Google is an amazing tool that I don't think a lot of people seem to realize how to use anymore. And I think also it just gets them maybe just asking the questions a quick, simple way to get some interaction. And I get that too. But it's just like that old meme of the, I love it whenever it pops back up on Twitter or Instagram where it's like, hi, I'll be at 5th and Main today from 1 to 2 p.m. selling cherry pies for $5 each. And then it's like a little photo grab of like the questions underneath. It's like, oh, cool. What kind of pies? How much are they going to be? Where are you going to be? Where at? It's just like, just fucking read, people. It's right there. But I mean, I got a little off topic there, but I think just being present in your local art scene, toot your own horn, have some postcards, have some stickers, have some buttons to hand out, and just making friends with other artists and not having them all be perceived as competition or, I mean, there's always going to be a little jealousy. There's always going to be a little competition. That's what makes, the creative spirit get juiced and fueled. But I mean, partnering with like-minded creatives is always going to make a louder noise and a bigger scene than trying to, do a little show of your own work at a cafe or a bar somewhere and hoping a bunch of people are going to come out. I mean, it might, but if you've got 10 other friends and they're all inviting 10, 20 friends, and then those friends that never knew you know you and vice versa, that's how community grows and that's how collaboration wins, always.
Yeah, that's amazing because, I mean, Jeremy kind of echoed it when I was talking to him about how he selects people in the convent that he shows. He was saying something very similar. He's like, I'm not going to show you if you're not coming out to the shows and participating in the community. And like the community spirit is really a big part of what he's trying to put on. And it sounds like that's an important thing to you, right?
Completely. With like Jeremy in the convent, he's coming very much from that, the dark arts side of things like, Last Rites and Copro. I mean, that's a very specific niche. And like he said, yeah, if he's not seeing you at those shows, then you can't sit there and try to lie to him that you're a big fan of it. Cause it's like, well, if you can't even come out once a month, why should I support you?
Is there any risk of an artist putting out too much in a year? Is there any downside to that?
100%. I mean, a great example of this is like I tell people to go and look at La Luz de Jesus, which is like a really renowned gallery here locally that's been around for 25 years and is, the first place that Ryden showed and Shore and Williams' first prominent show. I mean, they've not been as, prominent, I guess, say these last 5 years as they were maybe 10 to 15 years prior. But they're about to make some pretty big moves this year that's going to, I think, put them back on the map. And their new director is a friend of mine, and he's awesome. And I think it's exciting to see some rejuvenated blood there. Go back and look at their show history from like 95 to 2005. And like how many artists said if you were involved in the scene then, or at least have some history of the knowledge of the movement, and just be like, oh, damn. That just aren't here anymore, that just oversaturated the market. I've got a couple of artists that I always use as examples, and I've learned to stop doing that because I mean, they're friends and I feel bad. But there's a couple folks that like right around like 2005 to 2010, when this movement was really starting to crack and pop off, a couple people got pretty popular and had some successful first shows, and then got overly hungry, I think is the best way to put it. And then all of a sudden did like 3 or 4 solos in the span of like a year. And the third and fourth solos for both of them kind of tanked in terms of sales, in terms of sell-through. And sadly, the gallery world is a business. And when that happens, once, not a bad thing. 2, 3 times, writing's on the wall that, the shows are going to dry up. And the shows did dry up for both people. And one made a comeback of in a small way a couple years ago. And the other one, I'm not sure what he's doing. It can happen. I always tell artists that the art world is like one big chess game. every move influences the next. Just like I was saying with like how each institutional show we do opens another door. Each successful show or each non-successful show opens and closes doors, and you've got to be really mindful of supply and demand, I guess, that old term. If you've just had a big show sell out in March, don't go and do another one in May. I see a lot of street artists doing it right now. I think, I don't want to name names. It comes to a point to where, like, if you're doing 4 or 5 solos a year, it's just, press is going to get tired. They're not going to cover them. It's like, oh, Jesus, another fucking show from so-and-so? Really? Didn't you just do a show? And there's been a couple people this year that have had 2 or 3 solos on concurrently on a worldwide basis. And there's that notion of, oh, you're balling and your ego's probably feeling pretty good. But go and delve into them. I'm sure some people listening know a handful of the artists that I'm talking about. The shows aren't selling through. They're just shooting themselves in the foot.
Do you think that it could also affect the quality of the work if they're just putting out so much?
Big time. Yeah. There's a couple of artists. Yeah. It's just because you play to the hits a little too much when you're pumping them out that quick, and you notice that growth and experimentation kind of falls off. Not to mention a lot of very similarly themed works because, they sold in these 2 shows, and they're almost like remixes in a way. Especially some of the bigger artists out there that are starting to have teams behind them, which is kind of new for this movement, this little bubble of the art world. It's going to be interesting to see how that impacts the long term for these folks. There's something to be said for, exposure, but overexposure is a very delicate thing. And once you hit that, it's kind of hard to pull back unless you really regroup and restructure. And I think some people, they love that ego caress, and they're too deep in it to see it. And the people that are around them are money people, I guess you could, so to speak. So they want to see that. No one's looking long term, I think, is the best way to put that. I always tell people, like, look at the top tier artists that you respect. They do a big show every year or 2, maybe every 3. Not every second or third month. They have every second or third year. And then I'll hear people go, well, how the fuck am I supposed to survive in the interim? And that kind of goes back to that question that you asked earlier that I think I got a little off track of. But doing exhibition catalogs, a catalog of your work every 5 to 7 years, affordable prints, high-end prints, sticker sets, button sets, enamel pins, magnets, shirts, hats. There's so much stuff,
right,
that, artists that I don't think could do a button set, I'll go on their site and they'll have like a whole array of merch. And I'll talk to them and they'll be like, oh, I'm fucking killing. And it's just like, shit. And then I tell artists, like, just to start something as simple as, like, just start your own little Etsy or your own little shop. There's a number of artists that came to me with that. And I'm like, start this, launch a sketch each week and maybe a print quarterly. And I talk to them now years later and they're like, dude, that shop pays for my rent. They're like, thank you. Like there's just something they didn't think about. And then once you build that market and if you're smart about it and you fuel it just enough and you don't oversaturate it, it's crazy. Those 5s, 10s, 15s, 20s and 50s add up when you got 100 supporters. And then the Patreon thing that a lot of artists still don't do. I'm like, do the Patreon thing, man. It's crazy how much money some people make off that Patreon.
I'm seeing that more and more. Yeah.
It's a pretty amazing thing, especially artists that, are talkative, that have a bit of a personality. A lot of people, don't when you're just trapped in your room all the time, talking to your dog or your cat and the painting on your easel. I understand that a lot of people aren't dynamic, outgoing folks, but when you can turn it on a little bit and it really it adds up.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the anniversary show that you got coming up. So first of all, congratulations, 15 years. That's a huge thing, dude. What can people expect from the show? It looks like it's going to be pretty huge.
We're excited. We've started putting it together a while ago. We got about 95% of the people in the show that we wanted to. There's a couple big names like Audrey and Esau that are just at places in their life or schedule. Like Audrey's getting ready to move to London. Esau just did a huge museum show for us. And so, I mean, some people just couldn't take it on. And it's a bit of a bummer that not everybody that I wanted could be in the show. But I mean, it's a pretty amazing show. We've got 71 artists in the show. One person had to drop out due to life. But I think when I started the list, it was like around 150, and I knew we couldn't do that big of a show because we wanted the pieces to be on 15 by 15 inch panels, which are a little bigger than the 12 by 12s. And we just wanted the focus to be a little bit more honed down to people that we have really worked strongly with. Our family, as I call it, is vast. I mean, we probably actively work with about 200 to 250 artists worldwide, but those are more for the LAX touring shows and, you know, really showing the breadth and the strength and the, you know, diversity of the movement. But with our personal roster, we've got about 30 or so artists that we work with a lot. Like, you know, we're doing a solo every year or two and things of that nature. And then about another 30 or 40 to where we work with them a lot, but they've either got another prominent gallery where they do solos back home in Europe or where it be, or they just paint and have a lifestyle to where like solos aren't really, you know, in their wheelhouse, so to speak. So we keep them as busy as we can with other events and shows and whatnot that we do. So once we were able to kind of hone it down to that, we knew that we wanted to have Treckle involved, which is a local art supply company that we work with pretty heavily over the years. And when we did our 10 by 10 show, they had provided 10 by 10 inch panels to everybody. And I hit her up and I'm like, hey, I know 15 by 15 inch panels isn't a normal thing, but I kind of want to keep the vibe going that we did with the first one with you all. What do you have in mind? And she had these new floated, like built-in floater panels that they were messing around with, where it's one solid piece of wood, but it's deeply routed to where it looks like it's, you know, a cradled wood panel in a floater frame. And I was like, man, these things are pretty amazing. So we had it arranged to where we were able to get 80 of those from them, and then we wood burned our logo, our 15-year stamp on the back of each one to kind of like cement it as part of the show. And it just looks really badass too, I gotta say. And we mailed them out to everybody back in August and September of this year. And they're coming in now. I'm getting about 10 a day right now for the last like 4 or 5 days. So it's like a extended Christmas. Got a bunch of them over there right now that just came in. So
oh wow.
But no, we're really excited about it. And Elsie and I just worked on an installation for the show that we spent a couple days on. We hit up Spencer Little, the wire and wood sculpture artist that we work with, to help. So I didn't cut off a finger in the process. And I was like, hey, can you make me an 8-foot tall 15, like a 1 and a 5? And he created those on 1/4-inch maple with like a nice float behind them. And then Elsie and I went in and collected all the postcards from the last 15 years of shows, and we collaged them on the 1 and the 5. So that's going to be like the focal point of the show on like a wall that's painted gray.
That's amazing.
So people know what they're there for. It's like, oh, 15-year anniversary show. And we'll be doing like tons of giveaways and all sorts of stuff throughout the night. Not to mention, I mean, I can't imagine how many artists are going to come. So our 10-year show was in January too, which unfortunately is a pretty crappy time of year in LA in terms of the weather we have. When we do have bad weather, it's usually in January. And for our 10-year show, it was like pouring all night, and we had a line around the block all night. And I think we were open to like about 11:30 to get everybody in, because we kept popping out, thanking them for waiting and encouraging them that we're going to get everybody through. And so for this one, we're hoping that we have good weather, knock on wood. And if anyone's listening, know that no matter how long it takes, we're going to get everybody in through the doors that night. So
Very cool. So what else do you have planned for 2020? I saw a spread in your Instagram feed with Telmo Meal, James Bullo. You have a couple guys already lined up, right?
Yeah, our whole we're booked through 2022 right now. We teased our first 6 months of the year on Instagram, and we'll be putting the first 4 up probably tomorrow on our website. But we've got some big shows with some European artists that we've been building slowly over the last few years, and getting them into powwows and group shows and some smaller shows. But Telmo Meal, the duo from Amsterdam, we're excited to be doing like their first really big show. They're cranking away on some massive canvases right now. James Ballou too, another mural beast. He's born and bred like around the Baltimore area, but he's been over in Berlin for a number of years now, and we're really excited about that. Georgie Co., who used to work with Giant Robot, they're moving over, and we're doing some really big things with them in the year ahead. Historically, 2 of my favorite artists that we own a ton of fucking work from, the Date Farmers. They broke up as a duo 3-4 years ago, and Carlos Ramirez has definitely been flying the flag the strongest of the 2, and has had a couple shows with New Image and other galleries over the last few years. And he and I have been building a relationship over the last year, and we just had him out for DesignerCon doing a couple of really huge sculptures of his characters, and we're excited to be doing a big show with him, like just as an art lover fan nerd. Like that's one of the shows this year that I'm like, fuck, I can't believe we're doing a show with Carlos. I'm really excited. Hilda Palafox, Pony. We're excited to be doing her first big show out here. We're doing another big event with Powwow. This is actually their 10-year anniversary year back in Hawaii. So we're doing our normal show with them in February that we always do in tandem with the Mural Festival. And then in November, we go back over to Hawaii again. Tough, I know. And do a huge, huge show there in November of this year at the Bishop Museum, which is their natural history museum. And it's boggling to Jasper and I that they're giving us the time of day, let alone entertaining us to take over the whole museum. And that'll be a show that's up for 3 months.
Oh, wow.
And is, we're kind of we're deep in the midst of curating that right now, because we're fundraising with the museum and their patrons. So we've kind of asked about 30 artists to like, hey, what's your pipe dream? If budget wasn't a question, what would you create? And then, okay, you've got a budget of about $5,000. What could you create? And obviously, we're not going to be able to bring all said pipe dreams to life, but it's been amazing to kind of see what's in these artists' heads, especially as more and more institutional level shows are presented to me. Like some of the proposals have just been like, fuck, and like you want to make it happen so bad, like, and it's coming out of artists that you're like, well, I didn't know this was in you. That's been amazing to see. So that's been really cool.
Do you think the museum shows have caused artists to bring their A game and go above and beyond?
100%. Even with this 15 years show, I mean, pieces are coming in that we're like, oh, people are flexing. Like they're spending a little bit more time on these, because I mean, I think they know that there's going to be a ton of exposure on the show, and they're showing with artists that they look up to themselves, and they know that they're probably going to be seen by said artists.
Sure.
And whenever you can kind of light that candle under somebody, it's amazing. But yeah, I mean, for every museum show we've done, some of the best pieces I've ever seen from the artists included have come in, because yeah, I mean, you're getting 3 months exposure. It's a museum. There's every possibility the museum might buy it. So I mean, and that's something else that's, we didn't touch on. I mean, every time we do one of those museum level shows, a few pieces make it into said museum's permanent collection. And that's like,
wow.
Either via us buying and donating or them reaching out and purchasing directly. So, you can't ask for more than that, because that's that artist's legacy, being established and a piece being saved somewhere for history. And it's going to be safe and sound for years after they've left this mortal coil.
That's amazing. All right, well, we're right at the end now, so I have one last question for you, and it's something that I ask everybody. It'll be an interesting question for you because you work with so many artists, but who is one artist that you'd like to see me have on the show?
Oh, wow. Man, Spencer Little, I think, just because his story is... He could talk for 3-4 hours and you won't get bored. The fact that, like, I mean, he didn't really even think about being an artist until later in life, and his path to it has been pretty amazing. And how for like 10 years he's been, almost like a star down in San Diego, but I don't think any people knew about him until we really kind of linked him with the Powwow crew. And when that happened, it's insane. The year he's had has been fucking amazing. I mean, that collaboration, and what that's done for him with us and museums and Powwow especially. Yeah, I mean, he loves to talk about it. And the big multi-dimensional moving insane sculpture he just had at DesignerCon. I mean, Jack Black posted it and then got on the morning news. It's just one of those things that it's just like, it's still steamrolling, and it's just amazing because he's the sweetest guy. And if you met him in a dark alley, you'd be terrified. It's like he looks like an out of work WWE wrestler. Like it's just like he's a beast, and he's gotten to be one of my best buddies over the last few years. It's like, we ask him to come along to Miami and Hawaii, even if he's not taking part, to just be there, so to speak. Halo Pig would be another great person for you to have on your show.
Yeah, he has a fascinating Instagram, yeah.
He is a fascinating individual. And he's now he's fully entrenched in the legal weed world, and he still travels the globe to work with artists and assist them and document them and stuff. It's just two good passion stories. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on today, man. I'm really excited for the anniversary and for what you and Thinkspace have for the next 15 years.
No, let's hope so.
So that's it for this episode of Art Affairs. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Andrew. I'm really glad to have had Andrew on the show for many of the same reasons that I wanted to have Jasper on. Andrew has built his entire career around uplifting a community. Thinkspace, from its very inception, was built around this idea of collaboration, bringing people in and truly treating them like family, taking confidence in this idea that if you do right by people and help them become successful, the general improvement of everyone will benefit you as well. And like we talk about, more and more galleries are picking up on this and realizing that we are all a community and we're all in this together. I really appreciate Andrew's dedication to these ideas and his dedication to the new contemporary art movement in general. He's such a warrior for this movement, and it seems like every move that he makes is one that's aimed at increasing the spotlight on this art movement and helping to uplift the community around it. So thanks again to Andrew for joining me today, and thank you for checking out the show. I'm super grateful for your support. Feel free to shoot me an email if you have any suggestions for the show, or if there's a guest you want me to try and have on. Also, if you have any questions you'd like me to ask future guests, send those over too. I'd love to hear any feedback you might have for me. You can contact me through my website at artaffairespodcast.com. And like I said at the front of the show, you can also go there to check out any previous episodes. You can also find the show on Instagram and Facebook at Art Affairs Podcast. And last but not least, if you're on Apple Podcast, I'd be super grateful if you took a moment to rate and review the show. I can't tell you how much that actually helps. So until next time, be good to yourself and be good to each other.